And then we come to the modern era, a section called Neither Shy Nor Retiring. Stan is 89, and yet, like Al, he has like 3 new projects every week. That's Who Wants to Be a Superhero and Hero Man. I think something he did for the National Hockey League. Here's something called Not the Last Fantastic Four story that he did with John Romita Jr. So Stan is now working with 2 generations of Romitas. There's Stan's plot and the script, and John's pencils, and the inks by Scott Hanna. I'm not sure with the colors. This is a series Stan did for DC with sort of with the urging and with the help of Michael Uslan, called Just Imagine. Well, this is an interview with Uslan about that, the making of that series. But it's Just Imagine Stan Lee creating the DC universe. This is something that Stan did for me after he told me he absolutely positively would not do it. He had no time to write his top 10 tips for writers. He would never do it. He couldn't do it when he needed it. So it took him about 2 hours to write for me this thing he absolutely positively could not do. And they're great, Stanley's top 10 tips for writers. Not the first time Stan has written tips on publishing. There in 1947 in Writer's Digest. There's money in comics. So I hear. These are Stan's, a bunch of his movie and cartoon cameos. The bottom with Jason Lee and Mallrats, the top in The Simpsons. Some others. This is Stan's With Great Power. That's a new documentary that just came out on the upper left. I'm very proud of myself. Based on the cover dates on the covers behind him. That picture is from February 1954. Again, the hairline always moving. Here's Stan at the opening of the MoCCA show in 2007 with wonderful photos by our own Gary Bunier. Gary, well, Gary's taking some photos now. Did I pronounce your name even close to right? That's what I meant to say. And that's in this very room you're in. It's very meta. And look at the bottom. It's me and Jim Salicrup and Stan. And the book closes with Roy Thomas's essay, What is a Stan Lee? And we're back at the cover, so it blazes itself in the
We have time for a couple of questions from the audience, and then of course after that we'll be able to have a book signing, and I would definitely take advantage of the fact that you have all these people here to sign the book. So, any questions?
David?
A question, I guess, for Danny. Since you worked with Stan in the 60s, it always struck me that Stan and Jack as well. I mean, they're from the World War II era, and yet somehow, David, as you mentioned, that the young generation was struck by Marvel Comics and Stan's writing. Do you have any perception on, what he was doing and how he was able to sort of appeal to such younger readers in his work?
The disconnect between Stan Lee, the guy who lived out on the island, and the image that he projected was really fairly horrendous. He had this, not horrendous, but startling. He had a reputation as a really hip guy, and the most happening dude in the comic book field. And the reality is that he was socially pretty conservative. I was riding around the village with he and Roy, and I had mentioned that the night before I had seen Citizen Kane for the 3rd time, and he couldn't imagine why I would want to see a movie for three times. And then Flo can tell you the story of the great
the pen?
Let's Legalize Pot button.
Yes. Yes, that's a great story. Denny came into the office. It was the 60s, and we were trying to be good. And this thing called legalized pot.
Yeah, let's legalize. Which, by the way, though I had a whole catalog of vices, marijuana, I didn't like it.
It was just a fun thing.
Yeah, it was.
But Stan saw it, and he just went bananas and ripped it off or something.
And flung it into the wastebasket. If you're going to work for me, you have to give up some things, and that's one of them.
Yes, we don't want people to think we're drunk, which was weird. We used to get so many letters from people thinking Dr. Strange was on drugs.
What kind of acid do Stan and Steve drop? You will be surprised that of all the people on Earth, they are the two least likely.
Exactly. We're basically very strict, but we tried.
But he had an instinct. He picked up on things. He was one of those guys who could scan the front page of the Times and zero in on the article or the story that might be useful to it. And we would do it. I remember doing a TV show with him in Queens. And, you know, I was an East Village kind of guy with all that implies, but I was going to go on television with Stan Lee, whom I had always seen wearing a suit and tie. And so I found a jacket and I found a tie somewhere, and I had my wife cut my hair. And I showed up, and Stan was in jeans and a sweater. He knew what kind of thing we were getting into. It was not going to be a formal discussion. It was going to be a bunch of college kids. He is nearly miraculous in being able to put things together. I sometimes, well, like a lot of writers say, I didn't know I knew that until I read it, until I wrote it. I imagine that happens to Stan fairly often. He's also, I have to always say this, mellowed into one of the sweetest guys on the planet. I don't think he'd tear the button off today.
He laughed.
David, you gonna add something?
Yeah, I think also that even though it was, I don't think Stan chose sides in the comics themselves. There was no really political statement, other than the fact that they were against evil. And that was good.
Like most comic book guys,
that's what our politicians said.
Yeah, he didn't care about it.
Yeah.
I mean, most of us go through our lives trying to pay the rent, get the kids to school, and not understand the economy. Or the nuance, what we were being told, as you know better than I, about Vietnam was it is a bulwark against godless communism. And if we don't stop them in Asia, they'll be camping on your grandmother's lawn. And having no reason not to believe that, having nothing to compare it with, we did. Those guys who grew up in World War II grew up at a time when the world really was in peril. And the patriotism was a virtue. And then some might argue, though not me, that unscrupulous politicians took those patriotic sentiments that were generated by the war and made a buck here and a buck there.